And we're back. Welcome. Okay, so now we're going to kind of explore how these particles get their movement. And it comes pretty much entirely from particle fields, right, which are called forces in 3ds Max, which I'm sure you're aware of. And which forces did I use? Well, let's take a look. Yeah, so wait, I had that set up already. Okay, so I have a vortex field, wind field, kind of a deflector for this terrain here, and another wind, another vortex field, and a small turbulence field, right? So not that many forces going on overall. So, you know, there's this main vortex here, which is this big guy, right? And what I did to kind of keep the tornado together so you could move it around like this, I just linked, this this smaller vortex to this one, so they have a similar position, and that way the tornado kind of moves as a cohesive whole. And you can see, I'm not going to go into detail about what every single one of these attributes do. I mean, you could just look that up, but just play around. You know, I mean, that's how you're going to get a good motion, is just throw some particles in the scene, start kind of messing with these numbers to get something you want, and then you can adjust them per event later, which I'll show you how to do in just a few seconds here. Then, you know, we've got a couple of turbulence fields, right? So we've got the small turbulence, which is a very, like my scale's a 0.05. I mean, I like to keep my turbulence with a pretty low scale, because, if you get it up higher than that, you're really not going to be able to tell what you're looking at. It's kind of going to look like this noisy mush. And let me show you what I mean, right? So let's get close in on these particles. Zoom in on the biped guy. So, all right, we got some particles here, and you can see this ugly line effect that I'm not too happy with, but luckily the gas sim kind of hides some of that. If we change that field, that small turbulence field, right, and we put the scale up to 1, it's going to be subtle what happens, but you see that we kind of lose a lot of interesting motion and form, and we end up getting this thing that just looks like noise, noisy mush, and that's really what's happening under the surface. But so if I take this and I bring this back down to 0.05, right? 0.05, you can see we'll start to get a little bit of shape in there, and that looks really nice. I mean, that looks a lot nicer, and you start to think that it has an organic motion to it, and that's really important. Other fields going on. I got another wind, right? This is just a wind, that's shooting up. So if you want to make it gravity, you can just reverse it in the event. And I mean, you should actually use a gravity field if you wanted gravity. But then there's another wind in here. Yeah, this force wind, and this guy does have some turbulence, so he's got kind of 100 turbulence. And I mean, this number was balanced pretty well, but you can change it and get different results. We'll change it to 1 and see what happens. You get more of a kind of funnely shape. And I mean, this is the thing, is like if someone's going for this look, it's there too. Like, you can see how, I mean, if you wanted something a little more accurate to a tornado, I think it's dying because I turned off that particle vent, but it doesn't matter. This is good for demonstration. And I mean, that's a little more like a sand one, or we can put it up to 4. And again, you can see I've got my scale very low here. Like, if we put this up to 1, it's just mush. It's just noisy mush. No one wants that. So, 3 is good. This actually does have a wind direction to it, and what's neat is all right, this is a 10, right? This is where it was. 10, we start to get the look of our tornado. Kind of nice, and this is what I felt was a nice middle ground between chaos and a funnel shape. So let's have some fun here, and let's set this to 40. See what happens. It's going to calculate. You see at the bottom here. It's probably going to freeze for a second or two, but it'll update. And that's probably why thinking particles is a little better. All right, so you can see here. Look at that. We've just got this monster mess. I mean, there are parts of this that are actually kind of cool. And if someone was having me make like a crazy spell effect, this would be pretty fun. We can put it up even higher and get some real crazy stuff. I even think doing this kind of thing, if you're trying to do some cool lightning, You know, you didn't have them diverge like this, the particles. That would be pretty fun. God, I hope I get told to do that someday. But yeah, so you can see how these numbers really affect the look here, and so ultimately the look of this tornado is really just coming from these particle fields, and just play with these numbers. You know, nothing gets you a good look better than just throwing particles in the scene and messing with your fields. You know, that's really how you're going to do this stuff. Now, you can take this kind of a step further, because you just want these fields. You know, you want as few fields as you have as possible, so that you don't confuse yourself. You can see that these nodes, they all have kind of forces. So this has the force vortex and the force wind, and you'll notice here though I have a very custom influence. I mean, 31%. This in max defaults to 1,000 when you bring it in, and I almost didn't need the noise on this guy. I mean, that's just the particle that's coming out when he gets born. So I mean, I didn't really. You don't need this, and this could be 1,000, and I mean, it would do weird things, and I mean, not really important. Originally, I was imagining this as kind of like a spell, where, I was thinking someday video games will get much more advanced, and you'll actually be able to run simulations similar to this, maybe not for 5 or 10 years or so, but then this would be kind of cool. Like, it was a system that you could actually work with and make a tornado, and I was imagining it hits, this is the enemy, and it like flies toward him, hits the enemy, sucks him up, and like Diablo style or something. What's cool is you could actually spawn like a bunch of particles here. You don't need just the default ones, and you'll start creating tornadoes from random sources. And I actually thought that would be pretty cool. So if we make 100 of these guys, and I mean, just play around with this stuff. Just have fun and kind of make a ton of particles and see if you can make a cool system. So yeah, that's just going to be uselessly slow. So let's go back to 3. Now, these fields over here, you can see I tried to split them up. So I've got 3 force nodes in the event, and the reason for that, not just bundling them all together, is that way I can control their influence on a per event basis. So here we've got the wind up, which, I think that actually might have been the one that has a little bit of noise on it. And I'm giving it kind of this 989 influence, and this is just those black circle particles that are in the middle. This is the vortex. You can see it's got a 3000 influence, so it's very drawn to that vortex, and you'll see what happens is if I change this to just 1000, these guys get way looser, and you really start to lose the form very quickly, and they just kind of spiral out of control. And while that's neat on one level, not what I was going for. I really wanted to be able to make sure I could lock this down. So if we go to 3066, which is where we were, you'll see I wanted to keep it contained by this icon. I didn't want to go in too much higher than this, because this is my control to animate it. So if we make this 5000, you'll see it's going to get really packed in on that vortex field. Hold on, we're at 90%, 95. It's updating again for some reason. Okay, so I mean, that's just a different look. I mean, the tighter you go in on this, I found 3000 was a good number for me, and it's all personal preference. Just can't go too low, right? So go back here, change this back to 3000. Then we've got this kind of collection of general fields. This is the wind. This is the small turbulence. This is that small vortex, and this was me just kind of bundling that together. I mean, I didn't need individual controls over that one, so it's at a 677% influence. And okay, so from here, this is going to spawn. This is going to spawn these dust particles here at the bottom. So the dust guys, they have completely different influences. So you see here, they're affected by the small tornado. 118%. We can, boost this up, and you'll see a change in the overall look. It gets very uniform. They spin really fast. I thought that was pretty disgustingly ugly. So I really wanted to keep them, kill them, and I'd rather kill them than have them follow the tornado too heavily, because I didn't want their motion to be too fast. They should feel kind of organic and natural, just like they're sitting there floating almost. So then here we've got the small turbulence, and I really needed to give them the turbulence because that was important for this look. We could actually, let's see what happens if we exponentially increase this. I mean, again, you get that mush, but you can see not a horrible not a horrible look though. Then below that we've got the wind, and you can see this is interesting. I'm just using a negative force here because I really want them to kind of come back down, and I feel like the whole system is moving up. You know, these particles are traveling upwards continuously and emitting particles in that direction. So I thought it'd be really neat to get something going in kind of the opposite direction. So we can change this to negative 100. You know, you'll see they'll fall more. But as they start to fall, things get a little chaotic, and that wasn't what I was going for either. So I just wanted a little bit of influence, you know. And we can see that one important part using these fields that's pretty cool is the red particles, right? So why have you wondered why they're just staying on the ground there very perfectly? I'm not doing a lock bond or anything to keep them on the surface, so which is something you could do, but I actually think lock bond's pretty slow, way slower than I think it should be. However, it's a really awesome node that in thinking particles is really hard to set up. So this isn't doing anything. I don't think we need this speed, but this has the wind up, right? And you can see it has a negative 100 influence. So what this is doing is when this particle is spawned, I mean, it's just getting blown down, and then it has a collision event. So it's just getting blown down, it bounces up a little, it gets blown down, and every time it bounces up and collides, it, you know, I don't know. Actually, it doesn't do a collision spawn, so that really isn't important. But we can see if I turn it off, it'll just go through the floor, and we'd have no effect. So, boom, red particles just slowly sinking down. There he goes. He's still emitting particles, but that's why I felt it was important to keep him on the surface, so that he could kind of just spin around randomly and add to this system. And when you display 100% of the particles, which I'm not right now, you'll actually get more than one red particle. You'll probably get about 3 or 4. And that really gives it a natural look. So you can see, boom, he hits the ground, and he's just kind of stuck on the ground, and he's walking around spawning particles. And then these guys, you know, it's the same. It's pretty much the same as the other black circle event. And that's really all the work going into the fields, you know. So again, if you're looking to set up some kind of effect, just play around and see what comes out of it by adjusting some numbers. Okay, in the next lesson, let's take a look at kind of getting this stuff ready for FumeFX simulations. Okay, I'll see you then.